Hello, I am Nurbek Savitakhunov, and you're watching the news from Kazakhstan. 5 years in a minimum security colony with confiscation of property. The Aktau Municipal Court made its ruling in the case of Zhenizbek Demirov, the former head of the temporary detention facility in Zhanaozen.
The defendant was pronounced guilty of exceeding his official authority. The former chief of the detention center was charged with illegal detainment of Bazarbai Kinjibayev, arrested during the unrest on December 16, 2011 in Zhanaozen. According to case files, Demirov failed to ensure timely hospitalization of the man who died as a result of the wounds inflicted in the detention center. The court rules that Temirov Zhenizbek is guilty according to Article 308, Part 4 of the Criminal Code and sentences him to 5 years imprisonment, confiscation of property and a 5-year ban to service in law enforcement agencies. The term will be served in a minimum security prison and starts on the date of the sentence, i.e. May 17, 2012. The sentence Zhenizbek Temirov, as the investigation showed, has detained Bazarbai Kinjibayev illegally. Moreover, his subordinates stripped the man and didn't provide him with medical assistance. Temirov's family does not agree with the sentence, insisting the actual perpetrators escape justice. When considering the case, the judge was guided by the testimony of medics who were called to the detention center. Paramedics Orazbekov and Khangiriyev stated that Temirov didn't let them take Kinjibayev to the hospital, who could be saved had the medical assistance been provided a little sooner. The victim's daughter completely agrees with the sentence. In the future, I will do everything possible to prosecute Temirov's bosses. I completely agree with the court decision. His relatives are crying that he will be away for 5 years, but he took my father away forever.
Proceedings were observed by family members of both parties, as well as social activist and politician Musaghali Duanbekov, who flew in on this special occasion from Astana. Civic activist Kalim Agileuov also attended the sentencing. Both activists do not consider today's decision satisfactory because they see a clear, invisible hand of Akorda, whose political order was carried out. According to Kalim Agileuov, Temirov was made into a scapegoat, whereas he is merely a cog in a giant machine. Ultimately, we should all be grateful to Russian journalist Yelena Kostyuchenko for her courageous act. She did her job in good faith. And that is quite expensive in Kazakhstan, both literally and figuratively, said Kalim.
The third day's hearing was attended by relatives on both sides, as well as politician Musaghali Duanbekov and public figure Kalim Agileuov. Both activists believe that the decision is not a satisfactory one, because it's obviously politically motivated and directed by the forces in the president's administration. According to Kalim Agileuov, Temir has been turned into a scapegoat, while he's really just a cog in a larger mechanism. Kalim also noted that in the long run, everyone should be grateful for Russian journalist Yelena Kostyuchenko for her brave inquiry. She was diligently performing her job, and this is important for Kazakhstan in every sense of the word. Temirov is just 100th of what should have been, and the 5-year sentence can be interpreted in many ways. The man, for example, will serve 1 year and then get pardoned. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but he's there thanks in part to Russian journalist Yelena Kostyuchenko, who had brought up this fact, testifies that we Kazakhstan citizens are powerless in our own country because we try to ask for justice. Our voices and our facts are not accepted by the courts, as it was done for Yelena Kostyuchenko. This trial was a showcase that Kazakhstan's justice system and the country's leadership has been involved in Zhanaozen problem, that they really want to resolve that the top leadership is not at fault, but the responsibility is with the local authorities who have done all of this. So this is a showcase to set up the chief of the detention center as a scapegoat and present him as being responsible for everything.
The deceased Bazarbai Kinjibayev was detained in Zhanaozen on his way to the hospital to visit his pregnant daughter. He managed to tell Russian journalist Yelena Kostyuchenko about the beatings in the detention center just before his death. It was due to public outcries that the case against Zhenizbek Demirov was brought before the court. The trial lasted a little over 3 weeks. It was held openly, but audio and video recordings were prohibited inside the courtroom. A special press center with video broadcast was organized for journalists, but the quality left much to be desired. Details of the trial in the next report. Zhenizbek Demirov's court hearings commenced on April 24th. The case involved 4 victims, Tolenov, Kokanov, Kamenov, and Kinzhibayeva. 3 of them confirmed that they were tortured while in custody. However, they had no claims against Demirov. Only the daughter of the deceased victim, Bazarbai Kinzhibayev, who suffered from severe beatings, demanded justice. Her father was detained on December 16th and received beatings for 3 days while under custody. Bazarbai died in hospital from injuries sustained as a result of beatings. After the criminal proceedings and the bringing of charges against Demirov, attempts were made to bribe Asyam. According to her, the defendant's father offered monetary compensation in exchange for her withdrawal of claims. He approached me and said his son was not guilty, and he could pay me in exchange of acknowledgement that I have no complaints. He said he could give me any amount I'd ask for. I told him that I don't need any money. I can earn it on my own as long as I am healthy. Zhenizbek is guilty. He deserves to be punished. All I want is a peace of mind. He came to my home twice and even called me later. Yelena Kostyuchenko, the reporter for Moscow's Novaya Gazeta, attended the trial to provide testimony. She was in Zhanaozen from December 18th to 21st. At the time, she managed to speak with Bazarbai Kinzhibayev before he died. The man admitted he was afraid to go to the hospital due to his fears of yet another detention. When I spoke to him, his face was smashed. He had severe bruises on his back and a groin injury. He urinated blood, and he complained about pains in his stomach. We assumed that he had a broken rib, but he died 2 days later, and it turned out he had torn intestines. Relatives could not call the ambulance because phones were not working, and Bazarbai was afraid to leave his house because men who were arrested twice ended up in permanent detention. This is only one of many terrible cases. I am glad that it made its way to a trial, and there is a chance that the head of the temporary detention facility will be punished. It's unfortunate that people who tortured Bazarbai were not found. Sayran Khangireyev, a surgeon who examined the deceased, confirmed at the trial that hospitals indeed were instructed not to accept patients. Doctors who provided medical care to the people in prison gave their testimonies at the trial as well. Late Bazarbai Kinzhibayev was among those treated. However, he was not allowed to be taken to the hospital. On December 17th, I examined Bazarbai Kinzhibayev and provided emergency medical assistance. He explained that his injuries were sustained from the riot police beatings, but they did not allow us to take him to the hospital. Mukhtar Kozaev, the former deputy chief of Zhanaozen's Department of Internal Affairs and Temirov's immediate supervisor, also gave testimony during the hearings. After the bloody events, he was transferred to work in Astana. According to his statement, on that specific day, he only issued spoken orders to detain people. There were many contradictions in Temirov's and Kozaev's responses. For instance, Temirov informed the court that he was opposed to the detention of people without IDs. However, Kozaev insisted on it. At the second court hearing, Kozaev claimed that Temirov did not refuse to execute Kozaev's orders. During heated deliberations, the plaintiff's attorney also suggested to bring criminal charges against Temirov's immediate supervisors. Observers likewise spoke in favor of holding Kozaev accountable. The former head of the Department of Internal Affairs, Mukhtar Kozaev, was questioned on Thursday. I think he was promoted, and now he works in Astana. That's where he came from to testify. Why did he get a promotion? He should not be in Astana. He should be in prison. In my opinion, he should also be held accountable. Although he personally did not beat or kill anyone, he should be punished for allowing it to happen. He now claims that he didn't see and didn't know anything. Temirov refused to plead guilty at the trial. The prosecutor requested a 5-year jail term for the officer, and the plaintiff's attorney demanded a 10-year sentence. The judge sided with the prosecution. Arguments of the parties in the trial of police officers are scheduled for May 21st. They will begin as expected with the state prosecution report.
During Thursday's court proceedings, the presiding judge cited the case materials in 12 volumes and pronounced the police officer's case investigation complete. Later, the parties proceeded to schedule the date for the closing arguments. At the request of the claimants, the court hearing will continue next Monday. The claimant's lawyer, Abzal Kuspanov, didn't have a chance to participate in the case, but he said that the number of people who suffered gun wounds in December increased. The lawyer promised to submit the new evidence in the case to the investigators. I have explained to the victims if they have bullets extracted from their bodies or bullets still lodged in their bodies, they should come to me, and I, as a lawyer, will submit these bullets as evidence to the investigation unit headed by Ibragimov. I told the victims that they should not hide anything. We will wait for this court's decision, and after that we will try to cooperate closely with the investigation unit. As of now, I have had 2 more victims who brought me 4 bullets.
Former Prime Minister Akizhan Kajagildin voiced his opinion on trials in Aktau in an interview with Novaya Gazeta. The ex-PM believes that the judge must stop proceedings on 37 residents of Zhanaozen and send the case back for further investigation into defendants' and witnesses' allegations of torture during the investigation. Kajagildin said the court itself is anomalous, which is a classic example of the system in crisis. He is convinced that those guilty of taking part in riots should be punished. But the authorities must first find the young people in masks who looted and burned buildings instead of trying oil workers on strike. Unlike the year 1986, when you could place the blame on Politburo, Gorbachev, or Kalbin, this will no longer suffice, and therefore, someone should be held accountable for what happened. The Interior Minister, Governor, and Prime Minister must resign. Whether the President approves their resignations is another question. If he does, then the population will learn the names of those who are responsible for the Zhanaozen tragedy. If not, he will share the responsibility with them, as in the case with the new parliament. Zhanaozen City Police did not confirm information about 11 detained residents. This was stated by Venera Popova, one of the civil activists of the Zhanaozen, to journalists.
According to information at our disposal, the detainees include Tagan Goshanov, one of the activists of last year's strike at the Ozenmunay gas production facility, who had already been prosecuted once after police found drugs in his uniform's pocket. Tagan Goshanov's supporters believe that the drugs were planted. At the same time, Venera Popova says that all workers' city is too small to keep information about arrests in the dark. Things like that simply cannot stay unnoticed. Popova herself met with Zhanaozen DIA head Amangeli Dosakhanov, who denied the fact of arrest. I have been to DIA today, so I would have learned about it first. People usually call me because I have many connections. They call me if their children are detained, asking for help. And this is why I'm well informed, but no one called. So this is why I went there and personally asked the headquarters chief and other senior officers there. And all of them said they haven't arrested anyone.
Zhanaozen, executions, and tortures. I do not agree. This was the sign on the poster of the Karaganda blogger who organized a one-man protest in front of the Internal Affairs Department building. However, his solitary demonstration did not last long.
The weapon use was unjustified. That is, instead of using water jets, they were shooting people in the backs while they were running away. This is the first reason. And the second reason is that the officers of our city participated in quenching the unrests. And of course, tortures. Torture is just brutality. In this way, the Karaganda blogger has expressed his protest to all policemen who participated in Zhanaozen events. According to Galimbeka Kulbekov, his protest only makes sense next to the gates of the Internal Affairs Department and not at the Karaganda outskirts, where the local administration usually sends the protesters. Officials appeared soon accompanied by a prosecutor. Then everything happened as per familiar scenario. The law enforcement officer cited the law and asked for a signature, confirmed the blogger was informed of his responsibility, while other policemen surrounded the lone protester. The blogger decided not to tease his fate, folded the poster and left the scene.
The action commemorating victims of political repressions will be held on May 31st in Almaty. Civil activists will arrive to the stone where 3 years ago authorities promised to install a memorial to those who suffered from Stalin's purges. According to the head of the Ulagati Januya Fund, Mariana Gurina, the event will commemorate not only victims of the Soviet system, but modern-day dissidents as well, such as politician Vladimir Kozlov, Zhiltaksan participant Serik Sapargali, public activist Ajangul Amirova, who are all in need of solidarity and support.
During this event, we will be talking about those who were repressed and whose memory stays in history. These are millions of people who died during the Great Famine, were executed in 1937, and who are being repressed now. We will meet at the location of the future monument, at the time when the cells of the National Security Agency hold people subject to repressions. Zhanaozen tragedy, when the blood of innocent citizens was shed, will be discussed on May 31st as well. Civic activist Naila Chuykina sees the date as a direct reference to Zhezkazgan events. People living in the region are afraid to express their opinions, being cowed by the authorities. For me, the day of remembrance of victims of political repression is linked to Zhezkazgan, where a lot of people who were in exile with no right to move have built the entire region, but even their descendants now have the fear gene. If we commemorate those who died in camps, then the descendants will understand that we are free people, that is a free country, and then something will perhaps change.
The Zhezkazgan branch of Kazakhmys might be sold to the Russians. This issue was yet again raised by the media. Experts believe that a once failed deal with Metal-Invest might become real after all. There are enough prerequisites: the depletion of the deposit, social discontent of the workers, and the resignation of Vladimir Kim. More expert opinions in the next report.
Information about the acquisition of Kazakhmys by the Russian Metal Invest, headed by Alisher Usmanov, a tycoon listed by the Forbes magazine, has appeared in the Russian press. This deal was talked about for a long time already, but in 2008, Kazakhmys lost some of its capitalization and the deal fell through. Experts link the new round of talks primarily with the depleted Zhezkazgan deposits, resignation of Vladimir Kim, and involvement of the president's family in the metallurgical giant. Nazarbayev is a major shareholder in the metallurgical and especially non-ferrous metals industry. Therefore, Nazarbayev is interested in this deal not only as president, but also as a businessman. Analysts believe that Usmanov is more interested in the processing plants rather than the mines. After all, Metal Invest holds the contract for the development of Udakan, one of the largest copper deposits in Russia. Potentially, Kazakhstan can become an important strategic region, and it's feasible that in the future Usmanov will lay a railway to transport copper from Siberia to central Kazakhstan. Moreover, this will benefit the government of Kazakhstan, since it will stabilize the social situation within the country by injecting additional capacities and public contracts, and thereby extending the existence of single industry towns for a bit. According to analysts, by 2014, Udakan deposit operations are expected to reach volume production of 12 million tons of copper per year. In 2 more years, Metal Invest intends to increase the capacity up to 474,000 tons of cathode copper annually. The Russian company will require large processing plants, and Zhezkazgan has something to offer, considering the close distance to Udakan deposits. The British expert Tom Main is confident this deal is quite beneficial for Kazakhstan.
I haven't heard about the possible sale to Mr. Usmanov's group or whoever. It's certainly very interesting. What we'd like to see is just more clarity on who owns the...
However, no one at Metal Invest made any comment on acquisition of Kazakhmys yet. The bottom line is that Kazakhstan will benefit from this transaction. How do you know if this deal is real? It seems to me that one is interested in selling it more than the other in buying it. Experts say the main battle for Kazakhmys will begin upon resignation of Vladimir Kim, the current board chairman. Samruk-Kazna Foundation and Eurasian Industrial Group are the 2 most likely candidates to compete for the industrial giant.
Rahat Aliyev, the former son-in-law of the Kazakh president and former ambassador of Kazakhstan to Austria, sheds light on the circumstances behind the rapid resignation of Vladimir Kim from Kazakhmys. In his interview to the independent journalist Alexander Narodetsky, Aliyev unveiled that the ex-wife of Balat Nazarbayev, the brother of Nursultan Nazarbayev, Mayra Kurmangaliyeva, put an eye on the enterprise. Moreover, Aliyev informed that Nazarbayev's family owns quite a number of property abroad, in particular in France, the United Kingdom, Spain, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and Germany.
Вот эта Майра, бывшая жена Булата, она посягнула на собственность Казахмыса.
Mayra, Bolat's ex-wife, encroached upon a piece of Kazakhmys pie. We are talking about billions of dollars here. This is the reason for rapid retreat of Vladimir Kim, who is also a treasurer and envoy. In general, everything started to fall apart after the death of Vladimir Ni, the former head of presidential affairs, who was also responsible for the privatization of Kazakhmys.
Ответственность за вот этот проект приватизации Казахмыса.
The High Court in London will consider an appeal against the 22-month-long arrest of politician and businessman Mukhtar Ablyazov. According to Bloomberg, this verdict was announced by Judge Martin Moore-Bick, who said, quote, "It would not be in the interest of justice to require Ablyazov to surrender himself to custody as a condition of proceeding with this appeal, however badly he may have behaved," end of quote. To recap, the High Court in London sentenced Ablyazov to 22 months in jail for contempt of court on February 16th. Later, the same court decided to deny Ablyazov the right to defense if he fails to surrender to British authorities by March 9th. However, the former head of BTA Bank appealed the decision 1 day prior to the deadline. According to Bloomberg, which cites Ablyazov's lawyers, the appellate trial can start as early as July. The main opponent of the current Kazakh president indicated numerous times that he fears for his safety, and the petitions against him from BTA Bank are politically motivated. The current whereabouts of the banker are unknown. Advocates of civil society activist Vadim Kuramshin are preparing to go on pickets in front of the prosecutors' buildings in several cities. The Associates of Human Rights Activists made the announcement at a press conference in Almaty. Kuramshin himself is imprisoned in the Jambul region and is charged with extortion of bribes from the supervisory authority staff.
Со следующей недели начнутся акции протеста.
Protest actions will begin next week. I received information that they will be organized in Kostanay and Taras. We're planning protests in other cities as well. Furthermore, the international community is keeping a close eye on the fate of Vadim Kuramshin, namely Paul Murphy, the European Parliament deputy, and Andrei Hunko from Bundestag, Germany. The attorneys have not provided detailed comments during the press conference in Almaty in order not to harm the defendants' interests. So far, it is known that the witness, Kayrbai Kusainov, who earlier testified in favor of Vadim Kuramshin, has withdrawn his earlier testimony, saying he had made it up. Ramazan Yesergepov, a renowned journalist who recently was released from jail, is concerned that Kuramshin might face provocations. To recap, the defender for prisoners' rights was arrested on January 23rd in Korday village. He arrived there to consult the local businesswoman who had issues with the customs. The next open court session will be held on May 22nd. The patriots of our country are being heavily persecuted. Vadim Kuramshin's arrest is similar to the way I was suppressed, as well as Evgeny Zhovtis, Tokniaz Kuchukov and Mukhtar Zhakishev. All this happens while the Zhanaozen trials are still in progress. This is not only reprisal against specific individuals. The whole civil society is being intimidated now. Vadim is going to be framed in prison and he will be jailed for sure.
It was exactly 1 year ago that the first act of terrorism took place in Kazakhstan. The explosion in Aktobe occurred on May 17th. All year long in 2011, citizens of Kazakhstan were held in fear of terrorists. Special operations to neutralize them continued all the way until December 2011. The trials over the most dangerous criminals were conducted outside of public view. The analysis of the story is up next. It was exactly 1 year ago that the myth of Kazakhstan's stability was debunked. In Aktobe, a man named Rahimjan Makhatov committed a suicide attack on the Regional Department of National Security Committee, killing himself and injuring 3 others in the process. On May 12, 2011, the country began talking about a serious terrorism threat for the first time. Only a month later, another incident was reported in the Aktobe region. 2 Temirov regional policemen were shot point-blank in the Shubarshi village. The ensuing week-long search and pursuit operation claimed the life of an Arlan special unit member, while 3 others were taken to a hospital. At first, law enforcement officials denied any possibility of religious extremism. But as a result of a 14-hour battle with use of heavy artillery, the death toll reached 9 suspects and 1 commando, while 4 eventually arrested men were still convicted on charges of terrorism. They say that the police provoked them. Allegedly, they came to the mosque during the prayer and insulted them. But shouldn't someone who prays be more tolerant and forgiving? Instead, they wreaked havoc in the entire village. Another city to the west of the country has entered the picture in August, when Sergei Lee was shot in Atarau. It was announced that a special operation was underway, but the alleged terrorist refused to surrender. By this point, the authorities began actively using the term. The number of people charged with conspiring terrorist attacks went through the roof, with all of the related trials held behind closed doors. Observers noted that law enforcement officers were always the weaker party in all shootouts, while the negotiation tactics are never employed. Suspects' deaths before standing trial were classified by some human rights activists as pre-trial murders. Political scientist Rasul Jumali says the authorities were simply unprepared for such a turn of events.
Это привело к таким жертвам не только в Актобе, но и в Алмате. Можно вспомнить вот это.
It wasn't just in Aktobe, but in Almaty as well, when about 10 Special Forces soldiers were wounded during the clashes. This raises many questions about the preparation and professionalism of our intelligence services.
И профессионализм наших спецслужб.
At the end of October 2011, 2 simultaneous explosions rocked Atarau, one near the building of the regional administration and the other close to the local prosecutor's office. The completely unknown soldiers of the Caliphate claimed responsibility for the attacks, although their actions and reasons for the attack were both unconvincing and incompetent. Journalist Sergei Dovanov stands by his year-old opinion. The blasts and suicide bombings were all scripted, and the only goal is to keep the population of Kazakhstan in fear.
Позволивший подтвердить версию, что эти акции искусственно сделать террористическими, чтобы решить какие-то политические задачи.
This was the year that confirmed the theory that these attacks were artificially classified as quote-unquote terrorist to solve certain political issues. In particular, we should not forget that that was an election year. Therefore, as a scare tactic of terrorism and nationalism, they played a significant part and voters rallied around the powerful authoritarian government of President Nazarbayev.
Они сыграли очень существенную роль, и электорат мощно сплотился вокруг авторитарной власти президента Назарбаева. Это сработало.
Dovanov considers the events of Bloody Saturday in Taraz to be a similar ploy. On November 12, Maksat Karimov moved around the city for several hours. Fully armed, he shot 7 people and then detonated an attached grenade. Later, he was declared a jihad follower, but Sergei Dovanov believes he was only a cornered criminal.
Склонен полагать, что нашим органам верить на слово нельзя. У меня большие сомнения насчет гранатомета.
I'm inclined to believe that we cannot trust anything our law enforcement agencies say. I have great doubts about the grenade launcher. Even if there was one, its presence does not automatically scream terrorism. The launcher could have lied there for 20 years and not be touched. These are criminals we are talking about, and they always have weapons.
Это бандиты. И у бандита может быть гранатомет. Но какое отношение это к теракту? Понимаете, теракт и бандитизм – это разные вещи.
Activist Murat Tilibekov holds a different view. He believes that Kazakhstan has perfect environment for the spread of radical movements. This is exacerbated by political instability, social inequality, and fear of the state machine. Incidentally, the events in Zhanaozen served as a boiling point, claims the head of the Muslim Union of Kazakhstan.
Это идут фрагменты гражданской войны. Политика диалогов.
I would venture to say we are witnessing fragments of a civil war. The politics of dialogue have simply exhausted themselves today. People do not believe the authorities, and the authorities do not want to talk to the people. This impasse leads to both parties turning to the language of force. They do not make any demands, kill civilians, or take hostages. These are terrorists the Kazakh way. Some call them desperate, others radical extremists. But all this is speculation. The Interior Ministry, General Prosecutor's Office, and the courts still have not provided Kazakhstan's population with neither the names nor the demands of any of those convicted on charges of terrorism. The issue of establishing public television once again was raised by MPs. Today, the Senator Gani Kasimov appealed to the Prime Minister with the request to bring back the state ideology to television screens.
The country is badly in need of public television, said Gani Kasimov, ardently advocating the idea for the creation of mass media with right ideological values. The politician is shocked by the contents of TV programs frequently emphasizing criminal stories, fornication and violence. As a result, the young adults are degrading even more since murders, extortion and shootings are becoming a part of the everyday routine. The senator believes that the only way out of this is to appoint a deputy head of government on ideology and culture who will coordinate all the state activities in the area using the public TV channel as the main tool. In addition, Kasimov proposed to finance the channel from the national budget. For some reason, the senator is certain that many of the local media outlets are secretly owned by the foreigners. We sell major TV channels to foreign organizations and foreign financial oligarch groups, but this is an ideological tool. It is a matter of our national, spiritual, moral, cultural and ideological security. We should not have let the situation get this bad.
This is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.